the slow learning curve of leadership. No, this is not referring to it takes some time to become a good leader, because that's just the obvious. That's nothing we need to talk about. We all know that great leaders are not born. Great leaders learn how to be great leaders. And experience, as we all know, there is no fast forward for experience. So what are we going to talk about? We are talking about the slow learning curve of leadership teams. And I thank you very much for all the people who contacted me via email. We see more and more, especially in the recent past, that although leadership teams expect from their employees to have a very quick learning curve, the leadership team by themselves show the slowest learning curve of the whole organization. Of course, now some people will say, can you make a foundation? Can you make a foundation for that claim? And yes, I absolutely can. So just give you a couple of examples. So just recently, Armin Laschet, who wants to become the next chancellor in Germany, put a photo in the news where he said, "Oh, I just had an event today, and we're talking about the future of the country, etc., etc." And then you see the picture, and there we are again, all white men, all of them. One of these mistakes, which in the UK or in the US would never happen because a professional team would take care of this. And still in the German-speaking area, we see these non-diverse pictures over and over again. Last year, during Europe's largest HR expo, the largest leadership expo, recruiting expo we have in whole Europe, Zukunft Personal, which means future staffing or future HR. It doesn't really translate well. This expo had set the foundation for the so-called new initiative of new work. So there's an initiative for new work, and then there's an official picture including the Secretary for Work and Employment of the Federal Republic of Germany. And guess what's on the picture? Yes, all white men. First comment on Twitter below is from an economics professor from the Frankfurt School of Finance. It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? And it is. Because obviously people talk and talk and talk about making problems, making errors, but they don't learn from it. So just a couple of more examples. N26, an international billion dollar fintech company. People just recently decided that they want to have a workers' council or a workers' committee. Some people know works council, often strongly connected with the unions. Especially in Germany, you have a right from a certain size to have one of these councils. And the management, the senior leadership area, actively tried to block the attempts and to install some alternative kind of non-legally binding working people representation, which of course not only did not work, but the whole thing ended up in press, and senior leadership as well as the brand went down as the losers of this game. And I talked to a couple of people in fintech, especially developers, and they said they wouldn't work for N26. They said N26 is even known for being not such a great employer. These are not my words, these are their words. So when I look into evaluations on publicly available forums where they talk about N26 as an employer, you see quite a number of very critical but also very well-founded claims where people say, I probably wouldn't work here. Do you need more examples? Donald Trump tries to block the postal votes. Hey, who gives a damn about human rights? And the UK government just recently ranked the A levels down with an algorithm. So some people went from being an AAA student to being a BBC student. And I don't mean the TV studio. It's an algorithm which not only in working class areas downgraded marks significantly more than in other areas. Also, when you look at quite elitist schools like Eton, not a single mark there was graded down. Because maybe the algorithm found out that in Eton everything's completely correct, while at any other school maybe it's not. You could now think that there's a certain tendency behind these ideas. It's a massive scandal, and the main problem here is these A levels, especially in the UK, are so important. They set a direction for people's lives. The rest of the careers of the people is highly relying on this moment. Of course, you can always say, oh, you can go to university later, etc. But let's face it, how many people do that? Just recently on Twitter, a surgeon and a doctor said with the algorithm, they would neither be a surgeon nor a doctor. So that's simply true. And then the education secretary says, we can't give people jobs which are beyond their competence. Well, Interesting that someone from the UK government says that hashtag handling the pandemic, while at the same time you have Dominic Cummings saying that the genetic set people have tells a lot more about their intellect than their education. That's eugenics. That is proper eugenics, a completely unacceptable statement. And by the way, all these statements without any consequences so far. So what's the problem for your organization? When you have a company and you want to hire people, so you're relying on a good reputation on the market, and you also must be aware of the fact that people will not work for you when they don't have the feeling of safety and security. So you have to see, don't be ignorant towards privileges. When you are a very monocultural, non-diverse group, change that. Also, don't think that just because you are someone on the market and not in the focus of the press, it doesn't mean that you can't quickly become the focus of the press. Because when you assume that no one will talk about you, it can all go wrong with just one social media posting. Also, never underestimate the public perception of a brand or how quickly people, just by sharing it on social media, can make your company known in the wrong way. So what are the consequences when we keep going like we do at the moment? So consequences first, of course, we have a massive push for the unions and for left-wing politics, which for self-employed people like I am often means a massive economic disadvantage. And just to make it very clear for the people who haven't listened to the podcast in the recent past, I am not politically left-winged. You don't hear someone talking here who says, oh, I want left-wing politics in the government. We have a general election in Germany next year. And it is an absolute horror scenario for me, an absolute moment of horror to think that we might have a red-green government, which is the furthest left-wing government we would ever have since World War II. And I don't use left-winged or Green Party as a swear word. I simply say we have certain challenges at the moment, and I think the concept of the conservatives and liberals, for our US listeners, liberals in Germany have nothing to do with the liberals you have in the US. They're completely different. They are in for less regulation, low taxation, but in a reasonable manner. And I think that the ideas of conservative and liberals are just way better in Germany. That's why I want to have their politics in power. But it doesn't look too great at the moment. So we can't just go on and say, listen, young people, we have clue, you don't have clue, we hand you clue, and handing you clue means you adopt what we say without rethinking it. This is not working. So what do we have to do when something went wrong? So step number one. Say sorry and fix it. And that does not mean do it next month or next year. You fix it now. When you see you are a non-diverse group when it comes to recruiting, look into your process and look what's going wrong. When you say, oh, we only have non-diverse people applying for the jobs in our organization, then your whole employer's brand already is so unattractive that no one from a diverse background, from a non-privileged background, is going to apply for you. And every single time you will tell me now, oh, we are in a conservative industry. Yes, I hardly ever heard that one before. Conservative industry is what most people say about their company. And that simply means nothing else than we do not want to change. Let's go into a conservative industry. Let's say banking. Let's get into a competitive market. City of London. So banking, City of London. Competitive? I think it is. Monzo. Monzo is a company that was just founded a couple of years ago. Every single round of venture capital rising, crowdfunding, whatever they do, they beat their goals left, right, and center. And the reason is because they are completely different. Everything you hate about your traditional bank, they do right. And when you look into the annual reports of Monzo, 26% of their employees have an LGBT background. And by the way, if you now have to Google LGBT, you are already part of the problem. Sorry to say it in that very straightforward way, but we really have to stop the thinking of there's the old boys network giving each other the next job and at the same time claiming, oh, we can't give high marks to working class people because they get jobs beyond their qualification and competence, while at the same time the whole promotion schemes in whole industries is only based on coming from the same school, and competence doesn't play any role in these kind of scenarios. You're harming your employer's brand. when you keep going like that. So say sorry and fix it. Then step 2, acknowledge the privilege you have. By the way, if you fear that you lose power, let's face it, once you are in a privileged position, the next privilege is just around the corner. When we have a pandemic, you want to buy stocks, you have more money, so you're there in the first place. When there's a new thing happening on the market, a new trend, a new tech idea, you're the first person in line who's able to invest because you have the context, the network, and the money. So don't fear for loss of power. It's not going to happen. For some people, I have to say, unfortunately, but if you fear you lose power, you won't. It is a very subjective feeling that you lose power because you will never do. So step number 1, say sorry and fix it now. Step number 2, acknowledge the privilege you have. And step number 3, contribute for the better. Because when you contribute actively for the better, what happens is you will have higher motivation. At the same time, you will have lower employee turnover. A result of that is a higher productivity. And that's the point where we all like to say, yes, we want to have that. And also your employer's brand is becoming a lot better. But the main point here is it is simply about the learning curve. We would not let any employee of our organizations get away with such a slow learning curve, and people still see senior management doing mistakes over and over and over again, only talking about the solution but not delivering it. And that's the point which we have to fix right now, because we talked to a couple of people and organizations sent us emails as well, where they said, we tried to hire someone and they said, oh, sorry, I looked into your organization. It seems to be a bit dull and a bit very traditional. I'd rather not work for you. And then they asked, do you have something else, a different offer? Maybe we can negotiate. And they said, no, I don't have another offer, but I'd rather have no job than work for you. And that is something where we all have to see talented people have jobs. Talented people have the savings and the time to look on the market what's right for them. And they rather have no job than working in the wrong job. I wish you all the best when implementing this in your organization. And for today, thank you very much for your time.